The rowing all set now. It's the women's lightweight single sculls. Keep your eye on this lady, Beryl Crockford, as we rejoin Chris Baillieu and Gerald Sinstadt.
Beryl Crockford representing England, one of the great characters of British rowing. On the far side for Scotland, carrie-ann Wood. We've had no heats in this event, so to a certain extent unknown quantities, although we do have in lane 1 a world champion, Adair Ferguson from Australia.
Are you ready? Go!
So just a quick check on the lane order. For Australia, Adair Ferguson in 1. For Wales, Rhian Davies in 2. Phillippa of New Zealand in 3. Hattin of Canada in 4. Beryl Crockford of England in 5. And carrie-ann Wood of Scotland in 6. Ferguson and Davies, the two girls in the first two lanes, will also compete in the heavyweight singles in a couple of hours' time. This is Adair Ferguson, was a reasonable standard middle distance runner who only took up rowing 3 or 4 years ago. Beryl Crockford on the right of that picture, who's come down from 10.5 stone at the Olympic Games 2 years ago, has lost more than a stone to make the lightweight limit.
Remarkable girl, this Australian Adair Ferguson. The training which Joe was alluding to includes 70 miles of cycling to and from Edinburgh every day, which is, most people would find their training on the lake quite sufficient. She's a triathlete by background, and she obviously likes to maintain her training level throughout the season at all times.
1500 metre mark coming up, and Ferguson of Australia is there first. Beryl Crockford of England second. Canada and New Zealand disputing third place.
The dark horse of this race may well be the New Zealander Phillippa. She's another triathlete, and she again has done very little rowing, but she came out very strongly in the New Zealand Championships and chased the heavyweight sculler to a very close margin, and I think she bears some watching in this race. She's never raced abroad, so keep an eye on her through the race.
Phillippa for New Zealand, 23-year-old radiographer. There's the leading group. Adair Ferguson ahead, and nothing between the other three. Phillippa 5 feet 7, 9 stone 4 from Canterbury, New Zealand. Beyond her, Hattin from Ontario, 25-year-old student, and Beryl Crockford, the 36-year-old Londoner for England.
This is a very difficult race for all these scullers because they never raced each other. It's one of the most nerve-wracking things when you come up against opposition who you've never met. Usually you get to know most of the nuances of the odd sculler. But here, none of these four have raced one another. Clearly girl sculling strongly. Good technique.
5 feet 10, Hattin. Second in the double sculls at the Pan American Games in 1983, which was her first real international experience. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, England, the order at the moment. We're approaching halfway the 1,000-metre mark. Time in the top left corner of your screen is unofficial. Scotland and Wales out of the medal chase. Australia, New Zealand, Canada and England is the order.
And this is developing into a quite fascinating race, because nobody knows quite what each other's form is going to be over the second half of the course. At this point, it would appear that the Australian is under some pressure. She's only sitting on about a third of a length, which in sculling terms is very little. And she's got to keep well on top of that New Zealander, who seems to be sculling quite comfortably. And so we're going to be looking towards the last 500 metres, which may decide this race. I think she's creeping just slightly on Adair Ferguson. It's a matter of only 3 or 4 feet. And the Canadian is within 3/4 of a length of the New Zealander. There is everything to play for, and as we come up towards the last 2 or so minutes of this race. Canadian looking perhaps a little stressful, but both the New Zealander and the Australian looking comfortable and relaxed. No strain or sense of strain from either sculler.
So the world champion facing here a real test of her mettle. But that, I fancy, is just the way she would like it. Anxious to compete in the Olympic Games and contemplating moving up to heavyweight to do so. The New Zealander, Phillippa Baker, the Canterbury Rowing Club, giving her a real battle here.
New Zealander is certainly making her move. About 750 metres to go. She's actually pushing through. And what is the response going to be from Adair Ferguson? She's holding on to her, and they're rowing stroke for stroke.
.500 metres to go. New Zealand slightly ahead of Australia, with Canada in third. England 4, Wales and Scotland out of the picture.
Now that was a very punishing last 500 metres, and the question is, what have these 2 scullers got left? You know, with less than a length between them, the lead could change very quickly within a 10-stroke period. And the Canadian too is pushing up towards the Australian, and there's very little to choose between them as they're coming down towards the last minute of the course.
Well, the 8s are always the great spectacular of world rowing, but the single sculls take a lot of beating for head-to-head personal confrontation, test of mental strength as well as physical ability and coordination. It's New Zealand, Phillippa Baker. Beryl Crockford for England, back in 4th place as Ferguson for Australia and Baker for New Zealand battle it out with 250 metres to go.
What a remarkable performance by this New Zealander. She's sculling quite beautifully, and she has no form at all outside New Zealand. What a discovery. She's still sculling apparently well within herself, and the Australian is showing signs of some stress. Does not look as easy as it was, but can she find last reserves of energy to challenge the New Zealander? And she appears to be building up as she comes towards the last 100 metres.
So they've got about 125 metres to go now. Australia and New Zealand, and almost impossible to separate them. Ferguson put on a challenge. Baker has responded, and it looks as though Baker may hold it, or can Ferguson find the character to pull out something over the last 20 or 30 metres? There is nothing between them at all. This is going to be the closest of finishes, and the Australian found something literally in the last 10 metres there to win the gold medal from Phillippa Baker of New Zealand. What a marvellous performance.
Quite a remarkable race, and never was one like to see 2 scullers closing so well in the final stages of the race. A remarkable performance by both scullers, but Phillippa Baker coming from absolutely nowhere.